Good afternoon, everyone. Looking at several episodes of massive flooding across Afghanistan, when we look at where the ancient archaeological sites are near all of these dry riverbeds, drought conditions, extending all the way to Turkmenistan. Ancient times, green and lush. This is what the cities supposedly look like, that we have ruins now. There used to be rivers near these settlements, cities, and ruins. Now guess where all the floods are? Right next to these exact same spots again. Somalia, almost 1 million people displaced from the floods. Is the early Holocene left side refilling lakes? Chapter 2 coming on the way as we speak. This video is brought to you by TrueLeafMarket.com, heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet, including seeds for sprouting. And all of the stories I'm covering tonight, all the links are in the description box below. Going to bring you over here to the watchers. Top entry on flooding. May 16th, massive floods wreaking havoc across Afghanistan. We're going to come to Kenya as well with the dam break. Also, another instance just a few days later in Afghanistan, waves of severe flooding. This is what it's looked like from the air. I want you to take a good look at the landscape here, and if you look off to that left side, you can see a refilled river channel. I'm going to bring you over here to Camel. What they're doing is taking a look at all the known archaeological sites and mapping them out through Afghanistan. Everywhere you see a red dot, that's an ancient site that had a riverbed with water access to it that is now dry, arid conditions, and hasn't seen water flowing through those rivers for thousands of years. For an example here, fortresses, and this extends all the way up to Turkmenistan as well, across the Silk Road. You have to realize that in ancient times, a couple thousand years ago, 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, these were green, lush areas. You'll find the same thing out in the Tarim Basin, in Xinjiang along the Silk Road. It's desert now, but it used to be plentiful forest 3,000 years before. Now, when we're talking about these sites identified from Google Earth, these compounds had hundreds, if not thousands, of people living there. They needed access to water. So what they're finding is the climate had changed drastically and these riverbeds dried up. Of course, there are abandoned cities now everywhere you look. This is just simply from the 17th century. That's how much climate change has occurred since the 1600s with the riverbed changes. And Tar Osar, this is one of the most famous, the round enclosure there. Again, there were riverbeds near this that are covered in sand now. Renditions of what these sites would have looked like because they would have had to have access to water. Rivers running next to the cities, the enclosures, religious areas, ziggurats, they all would have had to have water. Now here's the most interesting thing. These last bouts of floods are flooding in the exact same areas where all these ruins are. Northeast and northwest Afghanistan. These rivers are starting to refill themselves. So you need to ask yourself, if this is a 3,000-year hiatus in the rainfall and the rainflow patterns, where now these same rivers that went dry and forced all of these civilizations to move, now the water's coming back to these same areas again. Very interesting to think about. And talking about the protection of Afghan archaeological sites, this is a 500,000 square meter site. 2,000-year-old Buddhist city atop 5,000-year-old ruins anyway. Water used to flow next to this in 2 rivers. Now it's bone dry, but the Afghan authorities are trying to save this in a battle against Chinese mining interests that are going to just scoop it all up because, hey, there's minerals under there. And remember this famous depiction before the Taliban decided to blow up the Buddhist statues. Here's what it looked like before their antics with explosives. Jumping over to Somalia, almost 1 million people have been displaced from these floods. Unbelievable the amount of rain that has come down. Worst catastrophic floods ever seen in this region. This is just one radar loop from southern Sudan, Somalia, Tanzania. Well, taking a look here, this is from flood list. 695,000 people displaced in this flood alone. Another couple 100,000 are the affected population, not displaced. There's a small difference between the two. It's nearly 1 million. And when we take a look at central Kenya, the dam burst during this same time, just a few days after that record rainfall. And then if we skip ahead again, we come to Burundi. 2 rivers overflowing, thousands of homes underwater, tens of thousands of people affected. And you might ask yourself, where is this on the map? So let's take a look at that big green arrow pointing to Burundi. Just a little bit to the northeast of that, you'll find Kenya. And then right up there, you'll find Somalia. Now, not a lot of people are familiar with Western Africa or the Sahel. So I'm going to bring you back here to the early Holocene. Let's go back a few thousand years in time on the left side of the chart there. Notice how much rainfall was coming and how full those lakes are compared to where we are in the modern era on the right side. So when you start to see these massive floods again in the 3,000 year plus cyclical pattern filling up these lakes again, you've seen the same thing over in Afghanistan, rivers running after 3,000 to 5,000 years of being dry. Talking about a grand solar minimum is one thing, but talking about multi-millennial cycles on rainfall repeating in 2 separate areas on the planet, that's quite another. But let's bring it down here to the most basic format on the 400-year cycle. As the waves widen, the more extreme the weather gets. So for the guaranteed 400-year cycle, these areas are going to continue to see rainfall out through 2019, 2020, 21. But as I'm seeing it, this is looking like something in a 3,000 plus year cycle repeating itself based on where the rain's accumulating in these massive inundating floods that are now refilling rivers and lakes that haven't seen rain in thousands of years. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of the video. How prepared are you if you have to pick up in the middle of the night and leave everything you own?